Hi folks, welcome to Set Apart Homestead. This is Travis. Today I'm going to get back on the homesteading kick. We've been talking a lot about prepping and things that could very likely happen in the near future. Today let's go and talk about homesteading. And I know many of you are already experiencing full-blown winter. We've experienced it a little here and there, but for most of us there's still a little time left before winter is fully upon us. And so let's talk about some things that you need to be doing, you can do to get your homestead ready for winter. Now, I know that not everyone watching has a little farm homestead. Some of you live in the city, and that's okay, because some of these tips can help you also. And we might actually touch on some prepping, winter preparedness for prepping, if that makes any sense. All right, so fall is happening. The days are getting shorter, the weather is getting colder, and it's time to start kind of putting the little farm or your home, your garden, your animals to bed for the winter, so to speak. And so first of all, let's talk about your garden, because many of you, even if you don't live out in the country, a lot of you still have a little garden, whether it's on your porch or in your backyard. Maybe you have very large gardens. So now is the time, just because the growing season's over, you've done your harvest, you're not done yet. You still have work to do. You need to clean those beds up, go through and the remaining of the plants that are kind of dying off, get that all cleaned up and get that put into your compost bin, your compost pile. Everyone should have a compost pile. Grass clippings if you mow, leaves, garden remains and clippings, and of course your food remains, what's left over out of trimmings and stuff from your food that you eat out of your garden. And if you don't have certain animals that would eat those, like chickens, I would suggest putting those in a compost pile to kind of get them ready for the next year to go back onto the garden to be used. So go through and clean those beds up, pull out the dead plants and that sort of thing, and get those on to your compost pile to start getting those broken down. If you have perennials, perennials can need to start kind of trimming them back. When you trim a plant back in the fall, and this works with most, now you might want to look into particular plants, because it may not work for the one, it may not be the best time of the year for your particular plant, but the general rule of thumb is it forces the plant to pull its nutrients back down into the roots. So you're kind of trimming it down for the year, and it protects the roots. And you can bring in straw. If you have that, straw works really good, and you can kind of build it up around it or even over the top of it, depending on the plant, to protect it for the winter time. So those are some things that you need to be doing now, getting your garden beds ready for the winter time. Animals, if you have any kind of animals, livestock or anything that live outside, now's the time to be checking their shelters, their pens, their fencing, things like that, because winter is typically hard on them, especially in some areas, and those of you in those areas, you know what I'm talking about. So you need to make sure the roofs aren't leaking, and they have good shelter from wind and snow and rain and those things that can make winter difficult on your animals. And now's the time to do that, which it's a lot easier to do now. Got a bug crawling in my ear, I think. Now's the time to do that, because it's a lot easier than the middle of a snowstorm to run out and realize, oh man, my goats don't have enough shelter out of the snow. So go ahead and inspect those and kind of get a plan. Usually on a farm, typically this time of the year is a little bit more of a slow time. You don't have all your planting and your harvesting going on, so you can usually do those other things that's needed. And one of those is your animal shelters and their pens and fencing, and kind of get those in order. As far as your home, I just want to say, I know there's a lot of people that are like, yeah, I already know all this. This is not any news. I know, but there's a lot of people that don't. and you never know, there might be something along the way here that you pick up. Another thing is heating your home. For those of you that use wood heat, the fall and winter are the better times to get out there and cut your wood and split your wood for the next year. And the reason is, especially after it gets, you have a good cold spell, you have less of your biting insects and snakes and things like that if you're going off into the woods to cut wood. And it's cooler, you're not out there in 95, 105 degree weather trying to cut a tree down, which is quite miserable. So you're going to work up a sweat in the middle of the winter time anyways if you're cutting wood. So it's much better to do it when it's cold or much cooler. Usually most people don't keep their wood pile right by their house, and the reason is because it attracts things like insects, termites. It attracts snakes, mice, things like that, spiders, especially ones that can be venomous. So you don't want to keep your wood pile right next to your house, but when winter starts coming on or getting close to, that you're going to start using some of that wood, I typically keep about a 3 or 4 day supply right up close to the house, maybe by the front door, so that I can easily get it. And it's not going to be there long enough to attract all those things. So for those of you that may be new to wood burning, that's a good tip. That way you're not having to walk out there and every day and bring your wood in if you heat on the inside of your home. Now, if you have an outdoor wood heater, then that's a little different. So there's some little tips right there for you. Another thing is making sure that your home, and this is good for wherever you live, make sure your home is ready for winter, sealing up windows, maybe even putting plastic on your windows depending on where you live. Checking your roof and your gutters. If you've got a roof leak or a roof that's got a spot that probably needs to be repaired, winter can be tough on it, especially if you get snow or any good amount of snow where you're at. That can be tough on your roof. So now's a good time to get up there on that roof and kind of inspect it, and if there's some shingles that needs replacing or things that needs patching, it's a good time for that. For preppers, for those of you prepping, it's a good time to kind of go over your preps. If you keep stuff in your vehicle, is it ready? Is it winterized? Do you have blankets and socks and jackets and stuff in that? Bug out bags? Anything that any type of bags or gears that you have, a Minuteman kit or anything like that, you want to kind of switch it over to winter and add some things, maybe remove certain things and add some things for the winter, mostly dealing with the cold, clothing, hand warmers, gloves, things like that that are better for the winter. And you should be doing that already in your supplies. The other thing that I wanted to talk about getting ready for winter or going through winter, for those of you, especially those of you that do live out in the country, maybe you're off-grid or you're close to that or you're working on that, you're trying to live more sustainable, you're out, away from the cities and stuff. A lot of times people kind of start to get bored. They get what we call cabin fever, and it can happen in the city too. I'm not, singling just the country folks out, but you kind of sometimes feel trapped, and especially in the more northern regions where winter can be a lot more tough. So one of the things that we need to remember is how people lived through the winters in the past. And the winters were always a time that families really kind of reconnected. They'd worked hard all spring and summer, planting and harvesting and working on the farm, and they getting up really early and staying out late, those types of schedules. And now we're all stuck in the house, and it's a good time to make your crafts, to do sewing, to do things together as a family. So, remember that this fall and winter, that as you're spending more time inside, it's a time to reconnect with your family. It's a time to go over maybe your preparedness plans and to talk about that and to, maybe tweak it and go through gear, inspect it good. It's a good time for those things. And to really bring back those old-fashioned ways of wintertime connection with the family. And it's something that our society's really lost. We don't have that. Everyone's so busy going off and work and volunteering and clubs and organizations and school and all these things that everyone does, churches and stuff, and we forget about our own family. And so the winter time is a good time for that, to do that. And to also, there's things that you can do. You've got your harvest in. For those of you that garden or raise food, the winter time is a good time to do things like drying stuff out, and hanging meat if you do that. Preserving meat. It's a good time for those sorts of things to go on the homestead. And I think so many people, they've lost connection with that. Some of you are old hands at it, and you know what to do, and this is not any big news to you. But I know there's a lot of viewers that are new to it. They're just starting out. Maybe they're still trying to figure out how this living more sustainable, living simple lives works. And so wintertime can be a challenge, because of the weather and because of kind of the isolation. You tend to not go out as much and do things as much outside, so you're confined more to your home. So remember that it's a time to reconnect with your family. Also, and this, I'm going to say this, but it should just be a given. You also need to be checking just your day-to-day gear that you're using. Especially those of you that raise animals and stuff like that. You need to have the right kind of gear for winter, depending on your location. Now, if you're down in El Paso or Phoenix, Arizona, or something like that, you may not need as much heavy gear. But if you're in an area that's going to get colder, make sure you've got the right gear. Because it never fails, in that when it's cold and you don't want to go outside and the weather's just beating down on you, that a fence breaks down, you got to go out and repair it. You got to round up the goats or the cows or the calves or something like that, and you want to make sure that you've got the proper clothing to go out and do that. Which is another thing that so many people nowadays, they don't spend a whole lot of time out in the extremes of nature. They go from their car to from their house to their car, and from their car to inside their work. So they're not used to spending long periods of time out in the weather, and they typically don't have the gear for that. And I'm sorry, I'm not picking on any particular brand, I'm just using them as example, but your little fancy North Face ski jackets and stuff are not going to hold up on a farm. See this stuff behind me? It wouldn't last one trip through that. Get you some good quality clothing, and it doesn't have to necessarily be expensive. A couple of years ago I bought a pair of heavy-duty insulated coveralls at a thrift store. Still had the tag on them from being brand new. It looked like that they had been stored and had some stains and stuff around the bottom of them, but these things were normally $80–90, and I think I picked them up for 15 bucks. So you can find stuff like that at thrift stores, secondhand stores, throughout the year, and always be on the lookout for that. But it's worth it to invest in a good pair, and I'm not going to throw out any brands. I'm sure people in the comments will, and that's fine. But make sure you've got good quality winter work clothes, because you're going to need it if you're living on a little homestead. All right, just get things ready. Again, most people in a modern society, they don't think about that transition of going from summer to fall and then into winter, because all they do is just flip a switch on their thermostat and everything else is the same. But for those of us that are homesteading, that are living self-sufficient, trying to live more off the land or a simple life, we have to plan for it, and we have to prepare for it a little differently. And right now is the time to be doing that. And for some of you, you obviously should have started already, because the further north you go, the weather is already getting pretty cold and wintry. So remember those tips. flashlight batteries need to be checked. If you use things, backup, oil lamps and stuff like that, make sure that's topped off. If you have kerosene, um, you know, stuff like that for backup heat, make sure that's topped off. Generator fuel's topped off. All those kinds of things you need to be checking right now to get you ready for winter, because as you know, when it happens, it's usually more expensive and harder to deal with if you have to go purchase it or go find it. Go ahead and get that stuff now and get stocked up and ready for the winter. And I've heard predictions, that we, for most of the country, could be in for a pretty good winter this year. So we will wait and see. I know last year winter lasted a very long time for some of you folks up north. So we'll see how this one fares for you. All right, folks, thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.